Hey, I am Warren Bird, Research Director at Leadership Network. Delighted to visit with you today. And in just a few moments, my guest, Kevin Penry and Kyle Kutter of Life.Church will come and join us. We're going to be talking about church metrics and have some exciting things ahead for you. We'd like to just walk you through a few things to get you started. If you haven't downloaded the paper called Metrics That Matter, Vital Signs Monitored by Large Churches, go ahead and do so anytime. It's free download, and it just highlights lots of fun ways that churches measure things besides attendance and offerings and the like. Let me, though, up front, give a shameless promotion for our wonderful sponsor of the paper, ACS Technologies. They're just a great group. They have all kinds of offerings from Headmaster, which is private school administration software, The City, which is a way to connect with your whole church online and everyone in ministry, parish data system for all kinds of churches to organize, church management and accounting software, and next generation web and mobile church management software. So ACS Technologies, check them out. One other technical thing, let us show you how to ask a question, and Stephanie Jackson, our publication manager, will run through that slide real quick with you.
Good morning, everyone. You should see some options either at the top or bottom of your window, or you can check your audio settings by clicking on this button. Check your microphone if anything's too loud or too quiet. Q&A, this is the most important thing. We'll be taking questions throughout the webinar. Just type it into that box and hit send, and we will get your question, and we'll either respond back via the chat or we will hold it and answer live. We won't be using the chat or raise hand features, so you can just ignore those, and we'll get right back to the content.
Great. So where are we going today? I'm going to give you a quick overview of our report. Kevin Penry of Life.Church is going to tell a bit of his story and tell us about churchmetrics.com, one of the free offerings from Life.Church. Then we're going to do a show and tell of some of Kevin's favorite charts and graphics. All along, we'll do Q&A, and time permitting, at the end, we'll do Q&A as well. So at any point, type your question in. I'll be monitoring it, and we'll try to answer things as either on the spot or at the end. And yes, we are recording, and we will send you a link with the recording at least by the end of this week. And we're going to try to do all of this in like 30 minutes. So with no further ado, let me introduce Kevin Penry first, and Kyle Kutter with him. Kevin's Twitter bio describes himself as a chart and graph enthusiast. And for a senior leadership team member of a church, that's not something you often hear. So Kevin, welcome, and Kyle as well. Kyle will be engaged a little later on. Kevin, tell us a little bit of your story as the chart and graph enthusiast.
Well, thanks, Warren. It's often a subject for some humor around here. My education was actually architecture. So I graduated with my architectural degree and spent the first part of my career in architecture. And then for a season, I was a commercial pilot for a couple of decades, and ended up being a flight instructor. And so probably something about the combination of the visual nature of being an architect, appreciating things visually, as well as the amount of information that one is processing as a pilot, and just to have that literal dashboard there in front of you, probably impacts me and kind of helps shape who I am today. One of my strengths on the Strengths Finder is input, and so I collect a lot of information. And as most of us have discovered in the last couple of decades, as data has proliferated, and as we've been able to accumulate more and more information, the challenge becomes how do I find it? How do I get to the stuff that I know I've got somewhere, or that I know could reveal something to me? And so I think that's why I would say we've entered into a season where data visualization, the ability to visualize that data and see what comes forward to us out of it is at a critical juncture. And I've had the privilege of being able to bring those passions into the church world by being here on the leadership team at Life for the last 17 years. And we've used it extensively, everything from a global operations center where we're heavily visualizing everything that's going on around us to our internal controls and all of that. So that's a little bit of what goes into to the passion and why it comes out in me the way it does. I do want to make one statement early on that if you've ever heard me talk about the subject, you're going to hear me express this. That is that we believe that numbers deserve a seat at the table. Not that necessarily numbers will drive us. And I often use the biblical example of Gideon. Gideon knew his numbers. His actions, the actions that God was leading him to, were contrary to what his numbers were telling him. His army was getting smaller, but his instructions and that which lay before him was a battle. And so the numbers, as they continue to get smaller, did not prevent him from doing what God called him to do, but certainly changed our interpretation of the outcome. And numbers today can do the same for us. So simply because we have the numbers at the table doesn't necessarily mean that the numbers prevail in our decision. We want to hear from God and hear that appropriate direction, but we do believe that the conversation looks more appropriate when it's at the table.
Well, and you've not only experimented with that at Life.Church, but you've made some things available for free through churchmetrics.com. So either Kevin or Kyle, give us an overview of how that happened.
Well, I'll go ahead and start, and I'll hand off to Kyle as to how the free part came about. We were fortunate enough to be coming about, to be growing, to be becoming who God was calling Life.Church to be at a time before we had come to depend upon resources as an income stream. So whether it was Craig's messages or the resources we were developing inside, there was no revenue stream yet associated with that. At the same time, we recognized that the generation that was coming on and was becoming a part of the younger church was expecting to receive their content for free, whether it was music or their videos graphics, or whatever the may be. And we and our leadership team determined that we wanted to make those things available for free. So we began that. It's been very successful. And one of the fruits of that has been our church-to-church team, which I'll let Kyle begin to describe that, because Kyle heads up our church-to-church team. Yep. And tell us a little bit about everything that happens there.
Well, and given the nature of what you're to talk about, you happen to have some slides to accompany it. So we'll play those as you're talking.
There we go. Well, the team publicly is called the Open Network, and really it's a team dedicated that wakes up each day. How do we give away all the resources, tools, now web applications to the capital C church? So it's truly 100% free, 100% for you and your church. We're equipping pastors and church leaders. Today, over these last 10 years, there's about 380,000 pastors and church leaders that take advantage of these resources, training, community, and now a suite of applications for the capital C church. And again, they're built out of the local church here at Life.Church, but our whole goal is not just for us to use them, but to give them to anyone that wants to use them. And here's the suite of those apps. So again, the decision 10 years ago to give away messages and transcripts now offer a complete suite of applications, from Church Metrics, the green down there, Develop.me, which is an HR goal performance management tool, Church Online platform, which allows churches to take their content from the week and their messages and create online community around it. The decision to give away the Bible app, when that whole concept came about. Well, 10 years ago, we decided to give away everything for free. So when we launched this brand new Bible application, just followed in suit. It's going to be free. And now the Bible app for kids. And then we also have a giving tool called Kindred, where we've partnered with a group called One Hope to equip churches with a giving tool called Kindred. So that's the suite of applications we have. But Church Metrics specifically, it's really all about, it's where decisions are informed. Like Kevin said, how do we allow churches and equip churches to bring the data from their weekend experiences or their events to the decision-making table? And really, there's just a few things it allows you to do. It allows you to put data very easily into the tool. It allows you to pull out charts, graphs, and reports, and then allows you to really look at that data. Say, okay, how does that data from my specific campus Maybe for my church, if you're a multi-site, it allows you to see the data for all of your campuses combined. And now we even have a feature for denominations or networks of churches to be able to see the trends and the growth and the numbers from groups of churches. So it's a variety of ways, things you can track. If it's a number or a data point, you can track it. Attendance, salvation, giving, parking lot, open seats. I mean, whatever you want, you can track. It's completely customizable. A couple key features of it, and Kevin will unpack this a little bit in his show and tell, but really our whole goal is to put easy in data, easy out data. And so in this tool, there's a free mobile application that allows you to extend this to your staff or volunteers to very easily put in data for those data points, if it's attendance numbers or giving, whatever you want to customize, to put that data in very easily via a mobile application, and then have the ability to review that data in the moment. So on the right-hand side, you can see that category attendance this week, last year, see your different campuses, notice trends. And what this does is it equips leaders and decision makers to see where is the data even trending for this weekend specifically, or where is it trending for the year over year. The next part is, man, as you walk into the week, easily have dashboards that you can review. There's just an example of being able to see some numbers, charts, graphs. There's widgets is what we call them. And then again, be able to get that data out by report. So, man, Monday morning, I want a report showing me year over year of attendance or salvations for this campus or this cluster of campuses. So easy in data, easy out data. And then in the recent years, as the tool has gone on, it's how do we equip this tool to play well with other applications? So obviously, Church Matrix has a variety of dashboards and reports and live mobile application, but how do we play well with third-party like Gecko boards and Tableau, where the data that sits in Church Metrics that was so easy to put in, how through the API that allowed data to come out. And Kevin will talk a little bit more about how we then take this API, suck that data out, and then visualize that data for our decision makers at Life.Church. And all this, Church Metrics, along with a suite of applications, resources, training, and community is all free, 100% free through the Life.Church Open Network. And that website is just open.life.church.
So Kevin, just a curiosity, do you look at the stuff on your smartphone and Kyle, or do you wait and come look at your computer desktop?
I would say the smartphone dominates the weekend. So typically the smartphone, we will be carrying with us all pastors, all leadership team, all kids leaders are going to be monitoring their smartphones through the course of the weekend, because it's we see this real-time update, and it actually will reflect even a trending. So we can see from our earliest experiences, our earliest weekend services, it begins to project and kind of show what the trending looks like, what it anticipates for the weekend, whether the weekend is stronger than last weekend, weaker than last weekend, stronger than last year at the same time. And we're able to just see campus by campus at each location what's happening. So I'd say we spend the weekend on the mobile, and then via the API, we will transport out to a little beefier dashboarding tools to spend the week really evaluating information there.
And one more question, if this one makes sense to you. Somebody asked, any plans to allow us to, quote, name a service?
Yeah, there's right now you have the ability, we added this a few months ago, the ability to maybe add a note to the weekend to say, hey, this was this series or this guest speaker, or it was baptism weekend, or basically create a note to it. So it wouldn't be naming the actual weekend, but adding a note to it. So as you go back and review the data, you get, oh, why was there a spike? Oh, that was when we had X happened. Or why is there a drop? Oh, that's when that storm came through. So the ability to add some notations to the data when you go back and review it. So that should be available now.
Excellent. So those of you watching, as you have questions, just punch them in the Q&A section, and we'll either jump in or have them at the end. So Kevin, now is the point we get a show and tell. I have always loved the graphics, which is why I put them at the top of the report that I did on Metrics That Matter. I just love the creativity in what you do. So talk us through some of the stuff.
Well, starting with just real basic, and I think it's always surprising to people to find out how few variables may go into some of the most interesting and insightful visuals. And your basic variables are simply attendance and giving are your most critical. And then that's you got to stop and realize that's probably going to be associated with a location and with a date and maybe a service time. So the data that data can be combined to just tell you some tremendous stuff. The most basic, this is just simple basic attendance and giving, which should be simple to everybody. But what's critical about seeing attendance and giving is looking at the annual patterns and flows. So many times I've found myself sitting with Craig, and he might be in the middle of a season where attendance is seasonally low. And he may not realize that. And he may feel like everybody chose not to come back for some reason that pertains to the interest in the message from last week or whatever the case may be. And we'll be able to look at it and say, no, Craig, no, every year at this time, the fair comes to town, yeah. Or school starts, or it's a weekend, it's a Memorial weekend, it's a holiday. So just seeing simple basic attendance trending can oftentimes be more important than you might imagine. On these attendance slides, you'll see the first one was a month by month, which would be higher altitude. That's the higher altitude. You can kind of see the trends. The top is attendance. The lower one is giving. In each one, you'll notice 3 lines. We'll typically do the prior year. We'll do a projection for the current year, and then we'll do an actual for the current year. So we're always interested at those 3 things. Are we in a better place than we were this same time last year? Are we in a better place than we thought we would be with projections? And how does that compare? Going on back to that next one, Stephanie, there's, this is just breaking it down week by week, so you can begin to see what's happening. It's interesting to me as I look at this giving chart on the bottom. This tells me that tithing is present. If you see the up and the down, tells me that people are, this is a congregation that are taught to respond with the tithe. You can see it corresponding to pay periods and times away and that sort of thing.
And even with the rise in online giving, that it's very common now in larger churches that we hear 50% plus of their giving comes from online, you still have those bumps.
Well, absolutely, especially because of online giving, if it's tied to a pay period.
Yep. So
oftentimes with online giving, there'll be an automatic gift that's associated with a standard receipt of a paycheck. And so that becomes even more prominent. Our online giving is upwards of 60%, a little bit over at this point.
Awesome.
So those routines even increase. This is one that's always interesting to me. If we were to take that same data of attendance and when and where, if you have multiple services, then it's interesting to see how well is your attendance distributing across your service times. If you'll notice at this chart, I've got both a blue line and a red line for each service at this one campus. So I've chosen a campus. This happens to be the Albany, New York campus. And the time frame I'm looking at would be for this week. This is not actually this week. This is a snapshot. And but the blue line would tell me how full the room is relative to what code would allow me to put into that room. So I'm always interested in how full is the room relative to the way we've got it set up, number of chairs. There may be times of the year that you would do what we would call a loose pack, and there may be times in the year that we would do a tight pack, where we bring more chairs listed, but you've always got to deal with life safety issues. You should never have more people in the room than what fire code would allow and what the room is equipped for. So in this instance, we see that we've got fewer chairs in the room than what the code would allow. So relative to the chairs in the room, we can see that our 10:30 on Sunday was full, 98%. At noon, it was at 91%. But if we could bring in more chairs, because you notice we were only at 71% relative to how full code would allow. But there's a decent distribution here. You can see how that our earlier services are somewhat matched to our later services. Earlier on Saturday evening, Saturday evening services are pretty well matched with Sunday evening services. And then you're always going to have your prime times where everybody thinks of going to church. So this chart to me is a reflection of leadership at the site and at the location. one of the biggest challenges for a campus leader, for a venue leader, or even for a senior pastor is inspiring people to action. How successful are you at getting people to attend non-prime service times? And this chart will tell us the leadership effectiveness at a location at a campus by how they're able to inspire people to move out of those main services into those non-primetime services.
Fascinating. Great.
Now, this on a broader level, so here we're looking at all locations. So we've got for Life.Church, and this has been true ever since we were back with 5 or 6 campuses. Here we're looking at 25, soon to be 26 campuses. And this shows every campus by service time and how full the auditoriums are. So if you notice, this was Sunday 10 a.m., Sunday 11 a.m. I can look and see that certain venues are reaching a critical fullness where others are. If you'll notice, the one kind of in the middle there at the 10 o'clock looks like it's our Mustang campus. So that causes me, I see this chart, and it causes me to go back to the campus chart itself and say, okay, is this leader doing a good job at actually distributing people out of that main service time into the non-main service times? Have they expanded their worship venues? Have they grown their venues adequately? Because the rest of the services, if you notice, were well below, and that one is standing out. This is just same chart, just for extended later into the day, so you can kind of see the service times. A great thing for those of us that are experiencing multi-site, it's just your questions and your evaluations become so different. When we were just had 3 or 4 campuses, there would be a lot of debates about, well, that might have worked there, but it won't work here. And once you pass a tipping point of 7 or 8 campuses, the conversation changes into, well, it's working everywhere else, why won't it work for you? Yeah. And so there's just something about, I think, the subtle nuances of multi-site and why it works are so interesting. You're doing things over and over again. You're practicing, you're repeating, and you're challenging assumed limitations. And so it's just it's a real good. And so especially if you're a multi-site church, it would be great that your data that you're evaluating can be brought into the conversation so you can actually see what you're learning and how to challenge. This is probably the most important chart for us, and that's kind of interesting if people hear me say that. Yeah. Many people will know that Life.Church has experienced success in creating margin, and that margin allows us to, financial margin allows us to breathe, it allows us to launch new campuses with confidence, and we really feel like we're operating where God would have us to operate. And we've been able to determine that much of that margin is driven by effective utilization of facilities. And this seat turn chart takes the data. Understand, there's no new data that we're adding. We're not adding new variables. From the very first chart that we started talking about here, we're taking different perspectives. So this chart is a result of what your attendance is, how many seats you have in your room, and how many times did you fill your room that weekend. So if I have 500 seats in the room and I have a turn rate of 2, that means my attendance that weekend was 1,000. All right? So it's a question of how effective am I utilizing my facility. And so it's going to be a function of how many different services do I have, how effectively have I distributed my attendance across those services, how full have I maximized my room to be, and how well have I distributed across service times. And so we're looking at, if you'll notice, our most effective down below is getting 3.7 turns. We've seen campuses that can get upwards of 5 turns on a weekend, but usually they're on the verge of an event, meaning there's a campus expansion that's about to happen, or there's some reason that the attenders are coming and they realize there's a lot happening and there's something bigger getting ready to happen.
Yeah,
But
this is so important. You know, the average church in America, which is 80 some odd people on a weekend and has a sanctuary of around 250, doesn't have that challenge. But the larger the church, then it exceeds its seating capacity. And in fact, according to one of our free reports at leadnet.org/megachurch, the average large church has a seating capacity of just under 1,500. And the way that large numbers of people are reached is through the multiple uses of those facilities and then the multiple site expansions. So what you're saying is so key for so many churches.
And it results in the margin, which allows for expansion.
Right.
This last one is just an example. I mean, this is just a tip of the iceberg, and there's so many places we could go. Kids information. We try to be minimally invasive here at Life.Church in the information that we look for, or ask, or seek. We don't put surveys in people's hands, and we always want to hear from people. But we got to figure out how do we do it by being minimally invasive. And this happens to be your kids' attendance has a wealth of information because everybody fully expects to sign their kids in. So you know who's present on what weekend in your kids' area. Same thing's true of volunteers. Yep. You know what volunteers are serving on what weekend. Yeah. And we are able to take that information where we know specifically who's attending when and extrapolate then how often our families are attending per month. Whereas we don't know every weekend who sits in the auditorium. We do know every weekend what children are attending. Yeah. We know which campus they may have attended before. So if they've moved campuses, we know how frequently they're coming, and it just provides an enormous wealth of information. This is just a real quick chart that allows us to evaluate kid to leader ratios in the kid spaces.
This is fascinating and awesome. Let me voice some of the questions that have been answered, and maybe we can do a short answer and get through as many as we can. A church under 200 in attendance, what's the most important thing to track besides the basic attendance and finances?
I would look for ways to measure their connection. How are they connected? And that's going to be serving. Whereas the giving is critical to you at that stage. Are they serving, or are they connecting? How frequently are they attending? Is there a way to find out who they're inviting? Are they bringing more? How are they growing, and how are they? How likely are they to invite somebody to church?
Excellent. Someone else says, I'm hearing a lot about weekends. Is there the ability to track midweek service and gatherings for youth groups, community groups, and the like?
Yes. Yeah, we just do the same thing. We just extend the parameters.
Awesome. Can I import current history from a Microsoft spreadsheet and the like? And how much history, if the answer is yes, can I bring in?
Yeah, there's totally the ability. There's a whole import documentation on this. Is a very common question I have. I've tracked it in one place. I want to bring it in. So yes, bringing it all the way down to Excel with different columns and rows and bringing all that data in. I don't know that there is a limit. Not to my knowledge that there's a limit of years past, but as long as the data is consistent in those columns and rows, they'll just import in.
All right. Anything you want to comment about privacy and security?
Of the data?
Yeah, the person didn't explain.
Yeah. And you can give permissions too. So the idea of enabling volunteers or staff to have that, there's permission settings you can for each user. So if you want to empower, let's say your kid's leader is a volunteer, and maybe you don't want them to have access to all the data, you can set those permissions up where they have access to a service, they have access to input data, or they maybe have access to only read data, not input. So you have the ability to set those permissions.
Awesome. For trend lines, do you use a rolling average?
Well, we can define it in either way. We can define trend lines as by date parameters. We can move the dates that we're looking at. We can see what the trend is within any start date and end date. So we've got the ability to impact and affect what we're measuring and what the trends might be.
Okay. How can church metrics.com be leveraged to measure spiritual growth, or which pieces of it most measure spiritual growth?
Well, that's kind of the holy grail. How can we really put data onto our growth as followers of Christ? And I know there's a lot of progress made on it in many instances. For us, we still look for some basic things like connectivity, connected to a small group, being others focused. Engagement on mission, being others focused seems to be a very true measurement of that, and being sacrificial.
Yep.
Whether things are done out of that maybe not be convenient, but they do it. Oftentimes, if we're not careful, we'll make the mistake of allowing. We're going to do this because it's more convenient for our attenders, and when in fact actions that are more sacrificial can demonstrate a greater growth.
In the tool, though, if whatever a church determines as a way that they're going to count a number, however that may be, if it's a number of groups, a number of this, you can create a field in there, put that data in, and be consistent adding that number in there, and then through that data getting out, then how you run comparisons, like all the visuals that Kevin shared, you have that data point, and through the API or through our widgets have the ability to compare data. So total attendance by total groups gives us some sort of ratio that then we look at on this dashboard, and we want to see it get to 10, and right now it's at 5, so we know the direction we need to head.
Well, speaking of wanting to get to 10, can the Church Metrics tool allow for a target or goal line to be drawn on it?
Yeah, you have the ability to put a projected line in it. A lot of the data that you saw that Kevin shared is through a third-party tool that then we leverage. It gives you all the customization of the visualization to it. So in Church Metrics, through what they call widgets, you have the ability to set those goals and projections. But then through the third-party tools, we found that there's a little bit more. That's where we got to the place of how do we extend it to where anyone can use it. Hey, our church uses X tool. Does Church Metrics play well with that? Yes, now through the API, you have the ability to connect those to it.
And similarly, someone says, all right, if they are customizable, let's say we track 3 categories of offering on a weekly basis. Could we customize the graph so that we can input, say, cash giving, depth giving to missions, giving to something else? And so
we call those subcategories. So the ability to say total giving is X, but that's made up of 4, 5, 2 fields that report that number up. So 5 numbers all reporting 10 each equaling 50, like that. It has the ability to count up what we call subcategories.
Okay. The kids check-in system, is that part of Open?
No, kids check-in system is separate. We use a separate tool for that. The data, though, the actual head count data, so we have the check-in data, and then we have the head count data. The head count data is what gets reported in the Church Metrics. Okay.
Several of the questions that are asked are looking for additional examples, and going both to the Church Metrics site, you have additional examples, and downloading the report, leadnet.org/metrics. We picked from, I guess, about 8 different churches. My favorite was the church that did after Life.Church, was the total number of life groups and the total number of participants, the percentage of growth in groups year over year, and the adult life group participants as a percentage of the weekend worship attendance. So you follow those metrics, and you're learning a whole lot.
Yeah, no, that's one of the greatest that you can look at.
Yeah, great. All right, and maybe we'll land on this question because we're just over our half an hour. Someone says, "Hey, nothing is free. How do you fund this?" And again, my hat is off to the generosity of Life.Church for the way you do fund it. And if you want to be more specific, you just build it into your budget?
It is. It's just a part of our budget, and it's a part of God's generosity. Ever since we made the decision to give those resources away, we've always had more than enough. And God's graciousness has made it there, and our budgets have always been able to cover it and then some.
Well, another example of you can't outgive God, and we just appreciate the culture of generosity that Life Church has demonstrated to so many, and may that be contagious as well. So just to wrap up, I'll let you each say a final word after I highlight your website, which in recent months changed to Life.Church, and then leadnet.org for the report, leadnet.org/metrics. If you want to get the weekly newsletter that tells everything that we release, leadnet.org/advance. As everybody knows, Christmas is on Sunday. How are large churches handling that? And New Year's as well. Everything from volunteer labor to financial giving. Go to leadnet.org/Christmas. We just released the large church salary report, free infographic, free executive summary at leadnet.org/salary. And one more, we did a study of internships. 74% of large churches are intentional about an internship or residency. What did we learn? Go to leadnet.org/intern. And finally, again, thechurchmetrics.com. Kevin Penry, Kyle Kutter, any final word before we sign off?
Just thank you for the opportunity. Leadership Network's always been a very, very important part of that God has used to allow the church to be what it is today.
Well, our joy is to see you make more and better disciples and multiply that through other churches as well. So everyone who's watching this live, when you close this browser, you're going to see a nice display of Leadership Network resources. Take a look at that. And otherwise, Kevin, Kyle, God bless you. Thank you. And we'll look forward to learning some more from you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.